Hi, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her, and I'm glad you're here. I'm going to give you a couple of updates today, and um, some of them are just like business stuff, some of them are personal things. Just do a little bit of like, what do you call the chit chat before the bulk of the episode? Um, I will give you a little heads up when we get into the, I mean, you'll be able to tell, but when we get into the more like, is the meat of the episode a gross term to use? the the main content of the episode. Um, I want to just put that out there at the beginning because the episode topic is a little bit of a tricky one. Um, I will give some disclaimers beforehand, and I'll just say now that I'm not going to give any specifics. That might be like, because sometimes the real specific stuff can be really hard to hear. I'm fine with talking about those things if you are wanting to reach out to me, if you're going through a similar thing, particularly if you have questions, like reach out, ask those specific questions for sure. I encourage it, but just in the bigger platform, I really want this to be accessible for anyone to listen to. And some of the things are going to be pretty hard to talk about, but also to hear. So just an effort to try to make this episode as, accessible and as possible. I'm just not going to give some of those big details. Okay. In terms of updates, I do want to acknowledge the last week I didn't put an episode out and I didn't even tell you. I didn't even say anything. That's the first time I've ever done that. And I just want to name that, like, I had full intentions of doing it, but over the summer, it was mainly all solo episodes because everyone's schedule, I feel like, is way busier in the summertime than we think. So I didn't do any interviews over the summer, and I did the solo episodes, which meant that I kind of got a little bit not behind, but instead of being like a few episodes ahead, I ended up being like doing the episode the week of, which is again the case. But I do have some interviews for you next week. So last week was the week of my teacher training or my teacher workshop. And I had way too much on my plate. I was so busy that I just didn't do the episode. I got way too busy. I was working on the presentation, working a bunch of stuff on that. And then, as you know, I'm still like doing renovations on the place we're going to be moving into, which I've talked about in previous episodes. If you have questions, let me know. So we're doing like a lot of like scrubbing of the cement floors before we fill them and treat them, and finishing bathroom stuff, and like there's a lot of stuff going on. Still living out of boxes. It was like early back to school stuff. Had to go do some other things to help other folks out. Had some stuff going on personally, and it just ended up being so busy. I just couldn't pull all of it off. I couldn't pull all of it off. I feel like one thing I haven't talked about tons on here is that I haven't like been officially diagnosed because it takes like thousands of dollars to get diagnosed here. I just will say that I have traits of ADHD, self-diagnosed. I'm not saying I'm diagnosed. Anyway, whatever. I identify with all of the ADHD symptoms. And one of those things is that like the time blindness, like I think that I can have time to do this thing, but then it takes way longer, or I don't have time, or I get hyper focused, that kind of thing. Last week, I definitely got very hyper focused on doing all the extra like last minute stuff for the workshop, and then also a couple of renovation things, that it was one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to like either pick like eating or doing the podcast or whatever. And I just was like, you know what? I will skip it. Partially because my partner encouraged me that it's a thing that podcasts do, like, fairly often. One of his favorites which I haven't listened to tons of, but I have liked what I've heard, is called Ologies. If you haven't listened to it, I would check it out because it's really cool. You learn about a lot of different stuff. And I can't remember the name of the host of that one, but she has ADHD, and she's talked about before, like missing an episode being late, that kind of thing. So he encouraged me that it was an okay choice to make, that it happens all the time, and it's not like it's going to be a habit. It's like one episode and it's not going to happen again. So I'm usually very, very particular about consistency because I want to be reliable and I want you to show you that I'm reliable. But this past week, again, I just couldn't pull it all off. Too many things on at the same time. So I guess to get that out of the way, or to just name that, I apologize for missing last week, and that's why. That's why I missed it. And yeah, I'm hopefully you're asking how the training went, or you're wondering how the training went. And I want to say it went really well. I really loved it. I put a lot of thought and effort into this training. It's all in stuff that I talked about all the time, but I really wanted to to really make sure that I had all the sources correct. Excuse me, that I had all the dates correct, that I had all of those bits and pieces in place. So I actually did a ton of different research, a ton of research on this, on diet culture, the history of diet culture, the racist origins of diet culture, or fat phobia or anti-fat bias, languages that we use around it. We did mention eating disorders briefly because they are often very connected. We did statistics about that. I tried to do as thorough of a job as I could about all of these different areas. We like mentioned intersectionality and ableism and all of these different parts that all connect because it's such an intricate, huge topic, which I like to still think is like a kind of a jumping off point. There's still a ton to learn. But it does cover a lot of different areas and a lot of foundations, so that if you're new to this whole world, or if you've been in it for a while, you'll get a lot out of it. One of the parts of that is that I offered, I can't remember how many times throughout the thing, to do a self-reflection. And part of that was to set you up with compassion, and kind of reigniting you with why you are doing what you're doing in the first place, or like what lights you up about interacting with other people. I was so fucking excited that the discussions we had around all this were so great. And I feel like I got just as much out of it as folks who are participating, that we like had a lot of really amazing discussions, and other people brought their experiences or the things that they learned or their perspectives or their things. And that's one of the things I love about this work, is that everyone has their own things they've learned from their learning or whatever, and we can come into this space together and learn, and then we can also share the stuff that we know, the stuff we've experienced. And oh my god, it's it's so cool to see. Honestly, I was so excited that we had those discussions. We did a movement practice. We did go through some, like, lots of great tools to how to create spaces. That was one of the bulks of the training. Honestly, I feel like it could have been a whole hour longer, because I had other things, other ideas I wanted to incorporate, but didn't quite have the time to get to it all because it all went so well. Anyway, I loved it. If this sounds appealing to you and you're like, oh, darn, I missed it, I am going to do another one. So currently I haven't figured out the technical part of setting up a wait list, but if you send me a DM on Instagram or email me, I'll link both of those in the show notes. I can add you to the wait list, because I can make it. I just can't figure out how to show you how to do it. So you send me your name, your email, and tell me why you're sending those things, and I will get you on the wait list. I wasn't originally planning on doing another one till the fall, but there's been quite a bit of interest since this last one that I'm thinking maybe spring instead. And I will get you to sit tight too, because I have another training, inclusivity training, happening in January, about queer inclusivity. And before that, in December, I am partnering with Offering Tree and my wonderful good friend, Shannon Crow, and we're going to be doing a little mini workshop through Offering Tree's platform. So lots of cool stuff. But if you are a movement teacher and you want to be on the list to hear about all these things, or if you're a practitioner, it doesn't have to be just movement teachers. We had people who weren't movement teachers at the training. I have people who are on the wait lists who are in all sorts of professions, like therapists, massage therapists, practitioners of other sorts, like energy workers, movement teachers, all of that. All of those folks, all of you are welcome. you don't have to be just a movement teacher. You can still get a lot out of this training. I feel like I finally got a cup that is more podcast friendly because it doesn't make any sound when you drink out of it. Yeah, so the wait list, that's one of the updates. That's the main business update I wanted to let you know about. The business section was like the apology and then the training. Personal wise, we have the bathroom and almost done. We're like putting some of the finishing touches, like organizing stuff, because it's a very small bathroom, but our aim is to have a lot of organization or a lot of like storage spots that it doesn't feel small. Like you can still kind of make the most out of the space. I'm really excited about it. Have been a little hyper focused on finding shelves for underneath the cabinet that fit exactly. Like I could have made them probably, but it was another one of those things where it was like, is this taking on a whole other project that's going to take, that's like, I don't actually have the time to do it. We are doing the floors. So if you are around for any of my studio classes, like virtual studio classes, you might have noticed that maybe you haven't, we've been scrubbing the floor. So the cement, it does look a little different because there was some like drywall mud that had gotten stuck to the cement. So all of that is gone. And what do you call it? Like, is it not weather stripping? I don't know if you've ever built walls before. When you're doing an outside wall, there's like the framing, the insulation, the plastic sheet, and then the drywall. Whatever that plastic sheet is, it was not stapled up onto the drywall. So it was just kind of like sitting on the floor before, and now it's stapled up, which I feel like is this such a small thing, but it looks visibly to me looks like, ooh, look at this. Like my space is coming together. If you were practicing with me back when I was working out of my old apartment, you probably know that I had like this cute little cozy space set up, and I'm doing the best with what I have currently under renovation, but when it's finished, it will look super cute. I think, and I'm really excited to put like I had a painting that was like, um, I can't remember if it was the pansexual flag or if I had a rainbow flag. Anyway, I had lots of cute little art up that I'm pretty excited about being able to have on the in the studio again. What else? Ooh, one thing I should say. When does this, I guess it's a little early. This is back to business. Sorry. I will tell you more personal stuff in a second. Back to business stuff is one thing I forgot is that I'm about to celebrate my business anniversary and I can't for the life of me remember right now how long. 2020. I started in 2020. So if I started in 2020, it's my 4 year. Well, that's really cool. So I have my 4 year business anniversary coming up. That's wild. The beginning of October. I'm not going to give anything away because I want it to be a surprise. Also, full disclosure, I haven't just made my final decision yet on what it's going to be, but I am going to be um, having a bit of a sale of some sort to celebrate. And so make sure you check out my Instagram or my website, or just my newsletter, any of those things, particularly honestly newsletter, because they'll be the first to know. Make sure you read that. If you're not subscribed, subscribe ahead of time, scroll into the show notes. There'll be a link there. I think it says like magical link for all things. It's in there. Go ahead and subscribe and you'll be the first to know about the sales. But I'd be interested to know how long I've been doing the podcast. I honestly can't remember, but it's not the same amount of time, but it's probably like a couple of years now, at least 3 years. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe I'll tell you next time if I figured that out. If you would like to support me and the podcast and my business and all the work that I do, if you want to celebrate with me, there's a link in the show notes to leave me a tip. It could be literally any amount. I think the lowest it's called through a website called Ko-fi, KO-FI, and I'm at like /move with Billy. There's an option. I think it's like $2 or something Canadian as the lowest, something like that. And then you can actually set up to tip me like that same amount once a month. So if you have an extra $2 once a month, or you're just really passionate, or you're really all for the work that I'm doing, which is, I personally think, pretty fucking cool work. If you have the ability to, I would love it if you'd set that up, tip me once a month, or tip me once now, or whatever, however much amount that you feel comfortable with. If you want to show your support financially, if you don't have the money to do that and you still want to support me, I would love it if you could send my content to other people, refer other people to me. If you love my stuff, tell your friends to start listening to, or tell them to start working with me as well. That kind of thing. That kind of thing makes a really, really, really big impact. So I would really appreciate it if you would do that. And anyway, back to personal stuff. I got myself recently a Kobo. I don't know if I told you that or not. I got it back in, I want to say like July, like probably for my birthday. I probably got it with birthday money. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I do love like real books, like physical books. Is that what you call them? Like paper books. Um, I do really love them, but partially moving into, a smaller space, trying to keep the amount of actual books I have to the minimum. So I'm going to try to transition to just having like my favorite books in the hard copy, which does mean I need to grab a couple when I see them on sale, because I honestly would just love to have a physical copy of a couple. But, which, I mean, maybe I'll just say two that I want. I can't remember the name of the second book, but there's the Psalm of the Wild Bill. I think it's by Becky Chambers, and it's like the Robot and Monk series. Those two books. Oh my fucking God. They're short, they're sweet, they're funny, they're cute as heck. And there's lots of different queer representation without that being the main focus of the book. Is just like a part of the world that's like very normal, which I loved. I loved it so much. I felt like reading a hug. I loved it. I don't usually recommend books, but I feel like that everyone should read those books because I fucking love them. Anyway, I want those in a hard copy because they're so good. But I recently got a Kobo. I got like a bunch of stickers and I decked it out, which felt really fun to do. Felt like my inner child loved it. And there's a website that my partner uses they have like sales for a bunch of, they'll do like a pack of video games at a certain discount price, and so much is donated to charity and so much is like, given to the publishers or whoever. I don't think it's called publishers, game designers, whatever you call that, studios. Anyway, they had a couple recently on books, and there's comic books. Or graphic novels, sorry. I'm pretty new to that. I got two of those bundles that were books, and have been kind of making my way through those. I've only read a couple. Some of them I like. One of them is a little too scary to read before bed. um, and then some of them are really hard to read because I'm using it on the Kobo. I have the Clara color, so it's like I'm not at all pushing this. I'm not paid by Kobo. Just telling you my situation. It's like you can read comics on it because there's color, but some of them it's like pink or yellow, and then the text is like white, and I can't fucking read it, which is kind of annoying. But anyway, that's one personal tidbit. I've also been down a Stardew Valley hyper focus again. I play video games sometimes, and I feel like I love the cozy ones. And like I played Sims growing up and loved it. But I've been back on Stardew Valley. I did play it already once. I didn't finish it, I don't think. Is there an end in that game? But I've like fixed the community center up. But I'm starting again, and it's been honestly kind of fun. It feels like a very cozy fall thing for some reason. And I also will I'll pause the music, but I'll put on my own like cozy lo-fi fall playlist. It just feels really relaxing and really nice. I have been I don't know, we did our harvesting for the garden. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily we didn't have tons and tons of stuff that came out of the garden, but we did have some stuff. We got like over 200 cherry tomatoes, which is awesome. We did get quite a handful of quite a few handfuls of tomatoes. We did harvest the potatoes, and we've harvested half the sweet potatoes, and we actually did grow sweet potatoes, but they're like little fingerling sweet potatoes. They're like little, honestly, they're so good. The skin is still it's not, how the sweet potato skin is like harder or whatever. It's like how would you call tougher? The skin on these ones is like still soft, and oh my, honestly, they're so good. There's a little amount. And some of the stuff didn't go so well. Like, I don't think we're gonna get any pumpkins. The radishes were like small as heck. We haven't harvested all the carrots yet because I've heard that it's really good to do after the first frost. Um, we did get quite a couple zucchinis. We got a couple teeny watermelons. I think we're gonna try, if I have the time. Again, too many things on my plate, and I'm not always the best estimate of how long things will take, but take a little bit of time to like set up the soil for next year, because I've heard that can make a big difference. Yeah, so those are the personal updates. I know they're like kind of all over the place. I probably have way more, but we'll leave it at that. There's a couple different random areas of my life that of stuff that's been going on. So there you go. All right. So I did give you a little bit of a heads up beforehand. It was kind of vague, I guess. I didn't really tell you why I was giving you a heads up. But we're going to get into the more, what did I call it? The meat of the episode. I don't know if I like that term. We're going to get into like the bulk, the main purpose, whatever the heck, of the episode this week. And I want to just remind you, as I said at the beginning, this is not a topic that is easy to talk about or easy to hear. We're going to talk about CSA, or childhood sexual abuse survivors, particularly my experience. And I'm going to say one more time, I'm not going to give you any of the dirty details. Ew, I wish I hadn't used that phrase. I was going to name that made me uncomfortable. I don't like that phrase in this particular context, especially. So, well, okay, I'm going to try to let that go. And I'm going to try to leave this in as much as I'm tempted to edit it out. I just want you to get the full, real version of me talking. I'm not going to give you any of the details. I'm not going to go into who it is. As much as that deserves to be named at some point, I'm not going to name it. It doesn't feel safe for me to do so. I'm not going to tell you specific memories, like specific moments. I am going to talk a little bit about my experience in healing and coming to accept it. And I'm going to also read to you something that I think will help a lot of people. So if you are a person who's going through this and you feel really alone, this episode, I feel like you'll get a lot out of. If you are someone who knows you have a loved one who is a survivor of CSA, that's what I'm going to call it for the rest of this episode. It's easier for me to say that than it is to say the whole name. I just want to name what it was at the beginning so that you didn't think I was talking about like the farmer's delivery. If you're a person who has a loved one who is a survivor, this episode is for you and you'll get a lot out of it. I'm going to try to do my best to answer questions that I've gotten throughout this past year of sorting through this. Oh no, it's over a year now. But if you do have questions, you can go ahead and send me an email. And if it is something that I feel okay to talk about on the podcast, I will talk about another episode, or I will just email you back and answer your question. You can also send it in on Instagram too. And also voice messages are fine. I know sometimes I'm like not in the mood to text. If you're a person that gets that sometimes, feel free to send me voice messages. I also will say that like if I voice message you, you don't have to voice message back. It's more so about me doing the actual texting that feels like a pain in the ass. So you know what? I might actually start with reading the thing that I think will be helpful. And I want to give a little context. I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and this friend has made it known to me that I can talk about any of the specifics with them, which if you are a supporter of a survivor, if that's something you feel like you can handle, does feel helpful. Because I want to say that like with this friend, with any friend I'm talking to, there's nothing that you can say as a supporter that can take it away. Like there's not like a one perfect answer and that means like everything's going to be fine. Sometimes, and like often survivors, I'm going to say myself particularly, but we're not looking for someone to fix it or to give us some miracle like phrase that will make everything better. we just want someone else to know what's going on. It's just helpful for someone else to know so that we're not alone, or just to be heard. Because what is that phrase of like, a burden shared is a burden halved or something like that? If you know what it is, let me know. But it's like, we don't want someone to list, like, to hear what we're going through and have like a fix for us. Because there is no fix. That's one of the hard realities. But we just want someone else to know. We want someone who care, like, just to remind us that they care, or that they love us, or whatever. So one of my friends has let me know that if they feel fully comfortable hearing about any of the memories that have that come up, and they said they'd rather me tell them than worry about, about telling them. And that's been really helpful to have. Really, it's my therapist, my partner, and this friend of mine who I've talked to. And it feels really fucking lonely to go through this. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But um, it's helpful. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. One of the things they asked is, what would, what can they do to help? What can they do to help me? Like, how can they support me better? And I will read out the thing that I said. But I would say to know that it's, I think sometimes we tiptoe around things because we're afraid we're going to remind the person of the grief or of the thing they're going through. And that's not the case. Like, you can't, I wish I could forget it. There's no way I can. Just the same way as if someone passes away, the person who's left there is not going to just forget. It's just always there. You know what I mean? So you might just like check in with your friend and like ask them what's a good way of helping them. Like, maybe for them, they feel like if you directly ask them how it's going with it, sometimes maybe that feels really supportive of them. Or maybe they just need you, like, they will bring it up, but they just need to be reminded that you care and you are there and you will listen, and they can bring it up anytime and it's safe to, and then they're not a burden. There's a lot of shame that can come up around this, and it feels really hard to bring it up with people because it feels like you don't want to burden them. And if you just remind them that they're not a burden, and, like, check in, or make sure you have that like open conversation of like, hey, let me know if it's not comfortable for me to ask you about it. Like, I really want you to know that you're not a burden, and I really um, am here for support, and I'm like I'm not happy to hear the details, but like, I have space to hear them if you need to just voice them. Um, one thing you can do is, I mean, I feel like it depends on your like love language, but you might do like a care basket, or like send them like, food delivery or whatever. It depends on the person. Like, maybe some people will love that, and because it is kind of hard to do. Like, one of the parts of it is that you have to be going through all of this processing, which is a lot, but then you also have to do your regular adult shit. So if you're like, um, if you send them like food, they don't have to worry about cooking. Or if you like come over and body double and like, help them clean, or just hang out with them when they're cleaning, or voice or video call them when they're like doing their work, or like whatever. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, and see what they would like. And I mean, I feel like this is probably something you would already get, but some people have a hard time asking for that help or accepting it. And I would just like check in with that as you go. So, because maybe they're like, oh, no, 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 you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. But like, maybe they actually would like it. Anyway, that's all part of a conversation. That's like a different thing. And I can't give you specifics. I'll give you more tips as we go. But I just wanted to lay that foundation too, because I know some of the first questions I get is like how to support. And one of the biggest things is just reminding them that you love them, reminding them that you care about them, reminding them that you're there. Hug them if they're a huggy person. Spend time with them, get them out of the house, that kind of thing. This part, my friend asked me okay, let me just look at the message. If I had a friend who shared this being the drama, the CSA stuff, what would I say to them? And I'm going to just read you what I wrote. If I had a friend who shared this, I'd tell them I believe them. I'm just going to say, first of all, sorry, one sec. I'm going to interrupt myself. If you are a survivor and you are needing to not cry, like if you're like on your way to a job interview, maybe pause this and listen to this after, because this might be, I don't know. It felt like emotional for me to write. It might feel emotional for you to hear. You know what I mean? Okay. I'm going to start again. To answer your question, if I had a friend who shared like this, shared their CSA story and experience, I'd tell them I believe them. I know how hard it is to share it, to remember it, and I really appreciate the trust and bravery that went into sharing it. I'd say that I know that it's really, really common to doubt yourself. And it's really, and I know the amount of work that went behind admitting it to themselves, let alone to me. I'd say that I believe them without a doubt. I'd say that never should have happened, that all that rage, the grief, the sadness is valid, that I know it swallows them alive, and it's difficult to wake up each day knowing what happened, that it's difficult to imagine waking up every day for the rest of their lives knowing what happened, that I'm there with them if they ever want to tell anyone so that they don't feel invisible with it, that I see the rage and encourage it, encourage them to let themselves feel angry to get through the shame because they have never, ever done anything wrong. They never deserved it. They deserved someone to protect them. They deserved safety in their bodies. And the grief in losing that is unexplainable. The betrayal is immense. I let them know that they can share anytime. And if I'm not in the space where I can hear, I'd let them know. I'd also let them know that it's their story. I know it's worse than they're talking about, and that they have the right to their story. They can be open about it and talk about it if they want to. That the asshole who did this should be the one who feels small and ashamed, and the one who doubts themselves. They did this. The asshole did this. They don't deserve to be protected. There we go. Let's just take a breath together, why don't we? Let's take a moment. You might notice the parts of your body making contact with the floor. You might notice sounds around you. It's really windy here. I'm curious how that felt to hear. That I don't even know how to. I feel like I just topped myself. Like, how do I follow that up? I guess I could do the things that I said that I would. I'm going to talk a bit about my story. I'm sharing this because I think that, first of all, I have the right to. Sorry, I feel a little bit stuffy. I think I've been fighting like a cold or something that from like the kids' school. I wasn't stuffy until I started recording, so maybe it's partially emotional. Anyway, I'm sharing this because I have the right to, because it's fucking lonely out there as a survivor of CSA. And although we, as a society, often say that, the perpetrator is a villain and awful, which is true, we don't often support or believe survivors, nor do we often have, I don't know. It's just the amount of times that it's controversial or taboo to bring up being a survivor is bullshit, because how can we say, oh, believe survivors, yet don't believe them, CSA survivors, or this is bad, but don't support the people who've been through it. You know what I mean? So I'm not sharing to trigger anyone. I'm not sharing for clout. I'm not sharing for anything other than normalizing talking about it, like to help other survivors feel seen, and hopefully to educate friends and supporters of survivors so that they know some things that might be helpful. But as I said at the beginning, it's very individual. Every survivor's different. Every survivor has different triggers. Every survivor has different ways that they want to be supported. This is just my experience. Some of the stuff in this is common. And I will just say, which I say, I feel like I say a lot, so you probably already know, I am not a mental health professional. I am a person who's lived through this and been to mental health professionals, but I am not myself a mental health professional. I can't diagnose. I can't give, I don't know what else would go with that, but there you go. There's my disclaimer. Okay. So about, I don't know, about May or April, February? No, February. Not last year. Will be 2022. I don't know. 2022 to 2023. February, March, January, February. No. Anyway, I don't know. Time is fucking weird since the pandemic, eh? I honestly can't remember. It was before Banana died, so it must have been over a year, because now it's been a year since she passed away. Anyway, a year, not this past February, but the February before. Why am I so stuck on this part? Maybe it's because I don't want to talk about stuff. This is hard to talk about, and I want to name that. Like, I'm not sharing this because I like to talk about it. I actually don't like to talk about it. I don't talk about it publicly usually. I have mentioned it a little bit, but I am sharing. I've thought a lot about sharing, and I've thought about it for over a year now, and I do feel like I'm in a place where I can talk about some of the stuff. But it does suck. I'm going to name that. Like, it is work to talk about. Okay. So, however long ago, a year and a half ago, is when all of these memories started to surface. And it was almost like there was something's like in the back of your mind, or you see something out of like the corner of your eye. It's almost like that was happening, and I wasn't in a place where I was ready to look at it yet. I think that, I just kept ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it until one day it got so big, or it was so, I don't know, it got to the annoyance where I was like, okay, fuck it, I can't keep avoiding this. And I just laid it all out for my therapist. And I was like, this is a thing that I think we should talk about. I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to say that right now. I do not want to go into this, but I feel like I need to. And that's kind of where it all started. And memories were really foggy and very vague at first, nothing specific at the beginning. And it kind of developed over time. And there was, what do you call it? Like, evidence was given. I got evidence. What do you say? Like, my story was validated. I won't say how, but essentially the story and the person who I believed was one of the people was like validated that it was them from an outside source. Okay, are you still with me? Maybe it's just me that's feeling confused. I'm so tempted to just stop doing this, but I feel like part of the experience is the awkwardness with it, is the difficulty talking about it. And this is a very real experience. It is very real that you might want to turn away from it, or that people who you're supporting might have a hard time talking about it or bringing it up or whatever. It's fucking difficult, and it's awful, and it's like a thing that your younger self went through, but your older self is now processing, but your younger self went through it and they didn't have the words to express it. So it takes a little while to figure it out. So in those first stages, it was between me finding out and we'll just say like it being validated from an outside source. Um, I don't know how long it was, but I do think it was a number of months. It might have been like, so I've not found out, but I started to accept it in like February, and it may have been like early fall that it was validated, um, or late summer. So it's like quite a number of months between, and um, all of that time, I was the one of the biggest fucking struggles is believing yourself. Um, because a very, very, very common thing with this, when people who are adults and having memories come up about CSA's childhood, is that you often don't believe yourself. Like you have a hard time believing it. It's really common to suppress memories because, I mean, I feel like I don't need to explain that. It's an awful thing, and you had to survive the thing you went through. And sorry. So a lot often that means suppressing it and suppressing memories and not realizing until you're finally in a safe environment. And then you have the memories, but then you have to work on the believing yourself. And it's like a much deeper way of trusting your body. And I think that part of the reason it came up when it did is because I put a bunch of time and work into trusting my body after eating disorder and trusting my body after diet culture and other trauma stuff. It was like I finally had a relationship with my body that I could start, this much fucking harder way of trusting myself. So it just started off as like me, my therapist, and my partner, um, knowing about it and going like I was processing it with my therapist. I lost Banana partway into this, not that long into it, and that was really hard. Um, and it almost felt like Banana, because she would often like come and sit on my chest or be with me in therapy, and she would often come, especially around the time I was starting to process this, and it almost to me felt like she was aware that there was something going on, and she would come and like help me regulate. Like she helped me to hold it until I was ready to look at it. Um, the sweet heart that she was. So I feel like I'm breezing through it, but I just really want to underline how fucking difficult it is to just believe yourself and trust in yourself before you even have the actual memories. Like it's like to me, it was like a feeling in my body and this like knowing in my body. And the memories that were there weren't super specific, that they were like they seemed on the surface innocent, if that makes sense. And it was so fucking difficult. It's a really hard process. So if someone opens up to you about them having gone through this, but be fucking mindful of your words. Believe them. Don't say like, oh, your therapist is like, be careful, your therapist might be putting ideas in your head, or like, oh, are you sure that happened? Or that didn't happen? Don't say that shit. Don't say it. Because first of all, it's going to completely invalidate them and they might not ever want to talk about it again. They might then deal with it silently, or just recognize that they have spent so much energy before they even brought it up to you to believe themselves enough to say it out loud, because it takes a fucking long time to do that. So just I would say that's like the biggest thing. Be mindful how you talk to them. Like, don't invalidate their experience, but just fucking believe them. Because people don't make this shit up. We don't make these memories up. People don't make this up. And please don't come at me with this like, oh, but this one time this person actually did. Like, I don't fucking want to know. The majority of people don't make this shit up. After that is when it was validated. Not only did it, essentially a piece of evidence was given to me that validated who I thought it was and what I thought happened. And then that feeling of it being like people believing me. I had don't think I started to open up about it till about a year after going, like, dealing with this. But even before that, like, this person I had told, the people who I anyway, I told a person, and evidence was given, and or validation was given, and evidence was given, and that feeling is so relieving. Is that a word? Is that the word for it? It's like it's like a big sigh. But then, you're like, okay, now fucking other shit's gonna happen. More stuff to deal with. Um, for me, it was a slow process. There was like little tiny memories at first that I would work with in therapy, and sometimes memories would just happen. They just come up. They would be sometimes very physical, sometimes the visual memory, not always at the same time. Um, and I often will sit with them first. I will work with it in therapy, and I don't go through it like pushing to um, need to know all the details. I just sit with the feeling of it in my body. I feel like I'm trying to explain myself to people who might be doubting me. Fuck that. I'm not going to explain myself. This is the thing I've experienced, period. um, and now I've had many more memories come up. I'm not finished dealing with it. I've just recently had a memory come up that's been like fucking awful to grapple with. And it's been really fucking difficult. And um it's fucking hard. So what else can I tell you? It's very common to feel shame about it. And one way that it's been explained to me in a couple of different ways is that our shame as a survivor is the would you say perpetrator? There's probably another word. Assaulter. It's their shame given to us. Um, and that I find really helpful. There is a book, I haven't actually read it. I haven't finished it. I've read the first little bit of it. I think it's called Healing Honestly. If you want to know for sure, I can send me a message and I can send you a picture of it. It's not right in front of me, but it's been really helpful because that author took a long time to do a lot of research, and they validate that like it's very, very normal to suppress those memories. It's very normal to have trouble believing yourself. It's very normal to have trouble talking about it. It's very normal to feel shame about it. Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's been a process of grieving and feeling rage and trusting myself and betrayal. There's a lot of parts to it, and it's really complicated. But without going into all of it, just saying that like it's really fucking hard. So if you know someone going through it, believe them. I'm so stuffy now. I'm not crying. I feel fully grounded, but for some reason I'm super stuffy. Um, believe them. That's the biggest thing you can do to support them, is just believe them. And as I said at the beginning, or like when we first started talking about this stuff, let them know you're there, and don't just say that the one time, like follow up, because I don't know about other survivors, but I feel like a burden a lot of the time. I don't want to bring it up to people because it's a fucking awful thing, and I don't want them to be um I don't know, struggling. I don't want them to like I don't want to make their life harder. Um know that they probably have already spent a lot of effort in like to believe themselves enough to tell you, and that is an honor. them telling you is brave, and it's a huge act of trust. Um, and if you are a survivor, know that I know the depth of the loneliness that you're feeling. It's a different type of loneliness. And I know that you are feeling like you're needing to rethink your entire life or reframe your entire life, because you kind of do, and your whole childhood. And that you feel like you've lost, in some ways, that you've lost your body, like it's not yours, or that maybe you've lost people from it when you've had these memories come up. Um, I know that someone should have protected you. It never should have happened. And that all of that rage is valid. It makes sense to come up. One of the things that I do, which I just had I talked about in therapy earlier today, is my anger. Sometimes I will use it to like escape feeling the grief and the sadness, which in some ways, I'm not saying that's a positive thing, but when I first started this and like a few years ago, I struggled to let myself feel angry at all. So in a weird way, it's positive, but it's still, I'm needing to be a little bit more mindful of it. Um, I know that maybe sometimes you dissociate or you suppress, and that makes sense too because you still have to live your life. I know that it's like, how the fuck is the world still going? Um, and that, like, how do you fucking wake up every day knowing that this happened in your body? It's like it's awful. And awful isn't even a big enough word. Um, it's a type of hurt that is deep and is difficult, and it feels really fucking lonely. So even if you never talk to me and you just hear this episode, I just really would like to tell you that you're not alone with it, and that you are strong enough. You are strong enough to get through this. And you did not deserve it. And it is not your fault. And all of your feelings are valid. One of the things that just came up for me is feeling like it was my fault. Logically, I know it wasn't. But because that feeling is coming from a little kid part of myself, if I immediately say, oh, it's not my fault, it feels a little invalidating for that part. Not saying that it is my fault, but just like sit with the feeling for a minute. And then, then do the validating. Like you wouldn't, if someone talks to you about their feelings, you wouldn't immediately be like, oh, everything's gonna be fine. You'd be like, oh, that feels hard, right? I would hope. If someone's like, oh my gosh, my boss just like said this horrible thing to me, you might not immediately be like, you should quit. If they're like, my boss did this horrible thing to me and I feel really fucking sad, you might not immediately be like, oh, like fucking quit. Maybe you would, but it feels a little bit better if you give them a little bit of space, like, oh, that sucks. How does that feel? Or like, that sounds really, I can understand why you're sad. Like, you just take a second to sit with it first. That's the part that, I mean, I've been working on it. And it's just something you keep having to come back to. So again, I'm working on it with a different depth and a different memory. And I feel like there's a lot more I could say, but I might just leave it at that because this is kind of a difficult thing. And I feel like this is again one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is going to be a short episode. And then it was not. I did do a lot of personal talk at the beginning. We did a lot of chit chat at the beginning. So that's good. I'm glad we did that. Um, let's end it with something a little bit more positive. Let's see. Ooh, let me just tell you something food things I've been loving. How's that? Um, I think we talked way, way, way back with Jordan about this app that I've used a little bit called Meal Lime. and I'm not trying to promote it necessarily. It is an app that there are settings you can add in weight loss stuff, but I don't, obviously. I'm not promoting that part of it at all. But you can put in your allergies and preferences and stuff like that, and then pick recipes, and it gives you a grocery list. And I was feeling before this like a little bit stuck with coming up with recipe ideas. Like I just couldn't think of anything. Excuse me. And it was just feeling like it was kind of frustrating, or like, oh God, what do I make for dinner? And I started to use this app again, and we've made some honestly, pretty delicious things that I never would have thought to make. One of the things I've like been into toasts, I guess. One of the ones I tried was like, well, obviously toast, and then it was like, what was it? Oh my gosh, I forgot what kind of thing was on it. And then I know there was like mushrooms, like balsamic mushrooms, and I can't remember if it was like, oh no, is it like cottage cheese? Was that weird? No, maybe? I don't remember. Um, the more recent one, which I do remember mostly, I think, oh my God, is like toast, and it was like ricotta with honey, and um then I can't remember what. Oh, almonds, like toasted almonds and coconut or something. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm thinking of getting a couple of recipes mixed up, but they're really good. I did also make a pumpkin spice pudding, which isn't like super puddingy, like not in the sense of like a pudding pack, but it was so good. Um, and I don't know, it just feels really nice to be trying these things. There's like a lot of really good recipes and things I never would have made myself, like known to make myself. Um, that's a joy thing. That's a food joy thing. I also do love fall. It's my favorite time of year, I think. I love Halloween. Um, I've watched a couple of Halloween type things. I haven't really I've done a little bit of like watercolor painting. I'm not going to say I'm like a necessarily a skilled painter, but played around with like like painting little ghosts. And I think I made like a little haunted house thing, picture. And that's been fun. I already told you about the game I've been playing. Reading, I've just finished a series I was reading. I just started to read the Society of Very Secret Witches or something like that. Super secret. I don't know. It seemed like a book that a friend of mine had read and seemed on theme for the season. And always have like 5 books on the go, I feel like. Those are my things. I've also been really like really into hot chocolate, but like lazy version of hot chocolate, just like heating up milk and putting cocoa and sugar in it. I have one of those little like foamer things, which is like on its last legs. It's like really trying. And I mean, also, my friend gave me their espresso machine, which is like not the fanciest thing ever. However, it is really, it feels fancy to me to have. And I have been really liking making espresso based drinks too. There's my food joy stuff. I haven't been doing tons of movement the last week, but I was doing like having really fun time doing weightlifting and doing a little bit of learning how to rollerblade. I've only done it twice and I'm not the best at it, but I'm trying. Those are the things that I'm having fun with right now that have to do with food and movement. I'd love to hear what yours are. Send them in to my email or my Instagram, and all of the links are below. If you'd like to support me, support the work I do, I would love it if you'd share stuff, if you'd leave me a tip, if you would subscribe to my newsletter. Next week, you'll hear some more interviews, and I'm stoked about those. I don't know if interviews is the right word, like more guests. If you are interested in being a guest, you can send an email. Let me know who you are, what you do, what you want to chat about. It's pretty open in terms of like what you could talk about, except for obviously no diet stuff. And I mean, I sound like a code of ethics and my values. So if you align with those things, then it's all good. If you have questions, if you have topics you'd like me to chat about, if you want to say hi, reach out anytime. My email is info@movewithbilly.com. Instagram is @movewithbilly. Same thing on TikTok and Facebook. I'm not on those super often. And subscribe to my newsletter, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.